Hey friends, welcome back to Guess What? Compliance Can Be Simple. I'm your host, Dr. Natasha Guess. And if you're new here, welcome. If you've been listening for a while, thank you so much for being a part of this community. Now, this podcast exists because I believe compliance shouldn't be overwhelming. My goal is to help healthcare leaders make compliance simple, practical, and just part of how they run their practices every single day. As usual, today's episode starts with one simple question. Could this happen in your practice? Every week, we look at real enforcement cases to understand what happened, what regulators found, and what you can do to lower your own risk of becoming the next story. Let's get into today's episode. Now, this is another one of the biggest misconceptions I hear from healthcare leaders. Our vendor signed a business associate agreement, so we're covered. And honestly, I wish that were true. It isn't. A signed business associate agreement, or a BAA, is an important HIPAA requirement. If a vendor creates, receives, maintains, or transmits PHI on your behalf, you generally need one in place. But here's the thing. A signed BAA is not the same as vendor governance. And that gap is exactly where a lot of healthcare organizations end up creating risk without even realizing it. Let's look at two enforcement actions. And both of these actions have one lesson. The first involved Oregon Health and Science University, OHSU, and it was back in 2025. OCR imposed a civil monetary penalty after a patient's right of access request got mishandled by the university's business associate. What caught my attention is that OCR made it very clear that even though a vendor was involved, the covered entity still owned the responsibility for protecting the patient's rights. The vendor's mistake did not transfer the organization's compliance obligations. Now let's fast forward to 2026. OCR announced a settlement with MMG Fusion, a healthcare software company, and according to OCR, an authorized actor gained access to the company's systems, affecting the PHI of roughly 15 million people. OCR alleged that MMG Fusion failed to conduct a risk analysis and failed to notify covered entities of the breach within the required timeframe. Same lesson again. The vendor experienced the breach, but the healthcare organizations relying on that vendor still had responsibilities once it happened. And there's a question worth asking here. If you're a practice owner or an office manager or an administrator or a COO, I want you to actually ask yourself this. How many vendors now have access to your patient's PHI? Take a real guess. Your EHR, your billing company, your IT provider, your cloud storage platform, your answering service, your transcription platform, your AI documentation tool, your patient communication platform, your credentialing company. For most practices, the honest answer is more vendors than they think. Here's my second question. Who in your practice is actually responsible for monitoring those vendors? Not signing the BAA, monitoring them. And if nobody comes to your mind right now, that's an operational gap, plain and simple. And another one of the biggest mistakes I see is treating the BAA like the finish line. It is not the finish line. It's the starting point. After the agreement is signed, your responsibilities keep going. Do you know exactly what information each vendor can access? Have you actually reviewed their security practices? Do you know how they'd notify you if something went wrong? Have you looked at your BAA recently to confirm it still reflects what they're actually doing for you today, or was it signed 3 years ago and quietly filed away? This is where operational compliance really matters. A strong compliance operations doesn't live in a folder of signed documents. It lives in repeatable processes. Someone owns the vendor relationship. Someone reviews the agreement. Someone verifies the security documentation. Someone keeps the vendor inventory current. And someone knows exactly what to do if a breach happens. That's operational compliance. Now, I want to talk about what happens when those processes do not exist. Say you have a vendor that experiences a breach, your practice gets notified, patients start calling, and your staff don't know who's actually responsible. You have leadership scrambling just to figure out what information was even affected. Then attorneys get involved. Notifications have to go out. OCR may get involved too. Suddenly, everyone realizes the BAA never actually answered any of those questions that mattered most. So could this happen in your practice? If you're relying on a signed BAA as proof that vendor oversight is handled, the answer is yes. It definitely can. Because regulators aren't asking whether the agreement exists. They're asking whether your organization or your practice actually builds systems to make sure vendor compliance is being managed on an ongoing basis, not one time when you sign it. I want you to keep that in your mind as this week goes by. Think about that. And here's what I want you to do as well for this week. Pull out your vendor list. If you don't have one, that's exactly where you start. And then you ask yourself 5 questions. Do we have a current signed BAA? Do we know what PHI this vendor can actually access? Have we reviewed their security practices in the past year? Who owns this vendor relationship? And do we have a documented process if this vendor experiences a breach? If you can't answer those questions with confidence, you've just found your next compliance priority. And if today's episode changed how you're thinking about vendor management, I'd love for you to subscribe, to review, and to share it with another healthcare leader. And if you're also wondering whether your own practice has operational compliance gaps, the Compliance Confidence Assessment Tool was built to help you find them before they turn into audit findings, before they turn into enforcement actions, or costly disruptions. You'll get a personalized compliance risk score and a detailed action plan to help you strengthen your compliance operations before regulators find those gaps for you. You'll find the link for the tool in the show notes. Remember, what regulators find tomorrow is usually decided by the operational choices leaders make today. Keep it simple, stay compliant, and protect your patients. I'm Dr. Natasha Guess, and thank you for listening to Guess What? Compliance can be simple. I'll see you next week.